It's Nano! Hello lovely, my name is Zoe, my brain's a dragon, and we are in National Novel Writing Month, and I am so excited. I'm so excited! Okay, so this is our planning video for week 1 because having a plan means that we can have something to scrunch up in a ball and throw out the window as soon as we hit the actual writing part of the day. This is fine. I have absolutely no problem with that. I expect it. We've done Nano before. It doesn't matter how much planning you do, you are always going to find that as soon as you hit the document, it's all going to look entirely different. And that's okay. So the plan for week 1 is actually really simple. We are going to test a lot of stuff. The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to give ourselves really broad goals because we know that broad is good. I also know that week 1 is going to be where I throw myself headlong into the project, and I probably am going to try and burn myself out in week 1 because that's what I do literally every year. And every year, my dear friends and everybody who knows me tries to stop me, and I appreciate their effort. Even if I do just kind of careen past them in a giggling ball, it's fine. In order to give myself some kind of framework that's not particularly ridiculous, I have decided that because we have 4 weeks, we are going to try and do one of each of the 4 sections of our novel each week. This means that we have a baseline. This is our good, yeah? So if we hit this, we are on track and we're cool. If we don't do any more than this, we're also fine. This means if I can get from the beginning to the start of Act 2, we are set. And I am cool with that. The National Novel Writing Month guide tells you that it's about 11,669 words that are recommended to have by the end of week 1. Because we're only going to be doing 5 days rather than 7 days, it means that we're probably going to be looking at more like 2,334 words a day rather than some of our previous numbers, which were slightly lower. But this is also week 1. I fully expect to throw myself headlong into this project, be so excited that I whiz past that mark and head straight on through Act 2 and possibly heading towards the midpoint. How much I get done will probably depend on how many spoons I have, how cooperative Brain Dragon is feeling, and whether or not I try and focus on getting some process down, or I just let myself be a complete and utter writing shenanigans and let it go. We'll find out. What I do know is I have some writing tips that I want to try and get into my prose so that I can make sure it doesn't make me feel sad when I look back over it and consider that I could have actually done a lot more stuff with what I had. This is my handy dandy writing tips notebook. Remember how I had a structure one? I've got a writing tips one as well because I like little note cards. The first one that I have that I'm going to keep in mind, particularly considering that I spent so much time agonizing over the beginning of chapter 1 because apparently this is what I do, is the Pope in the Pool. Advice from Save the Cat. That is basically if you can have information delivered in an interesting environment or in a way that helps build in story or raises questions like, I didn't know the Pope had a pool, which apparently he does, which I think is kind of cool. But if you can raise the information or transmit the information from the characters to the reader in a fashion that is interesting, you'll be able to keep them on the page longer. Exposition is usually a trap. Making it so that it can come across and give you additional context, really good use of words. The next piece of advice that I'm going to keep in mind is let the reader judge. Now, I have had this from a couple of sources. It's in Save the Cat, it's in The Heroine's Journey. It's also a piece of advice that I got in person from a lovely Australian author by the name of Anne Gracie, who I absolutely love. Her Regency historical romances, she's brilliant. But her advice was that if a reader sees a character doing something, they are way more likely to believe it than if you, the author, tell them. If, for example, you say that there is this lovely old lady and I can't believe it, but I saw her upsetting a box of puppies before she came into the room. Are you really going to believe the lovely lady who's given you a cup of tea and some biscuits would do such a thing? I think we're skeptical, right? Unless we also see it, or we see evidence of it and we start to go, oh, maybe there is more to this. And that's the thing. You have to trust your reader. Your reader is a smart person. Even if that person is you. Trust me, sweetie, you are way smarter than you think you are. Trust them to be able to pick up on the cues. We do it all the time with people in real life. We're very practiced. And we spend a lot of time in narrative, so we're used to doing it. Give them the option of figuring some of the things about your character out themselves. The other thing that I want to have a look at is 2-bird minimum. This comes from 2K to 10K and is basically the idea that every scene that you have is doing at least two things. One, it is moving the story forward, it's providing new information, and it's probably trying to encourage the reader to feel more engaged with the story. This is either through giving them information that they've been waiting for, setting hooks, or making them feel emotions that they want to process, particularly if they're processing with the characters. This also means that you can keep your writing fairly tight, and it means that when you're looking at 50,000 words, which, let's be honest, when you're writing a fantasy romance or any genre fiction designed around a larger word count, efficiency is key here. Most of the fantasy romances that I really like are between 60 and 80, sometimes 100,000 words. So we're looking at considerably less words to play with. And that could be a real problem if I'm trying to get the story done in 50,000 words, which is pretty much where I'm going to try and go because I can add words in editing. Taking out words can get a little bit trickier for me. We're also going to have a look at talking head avoidance devices. This comes from Deborah Chester's fantasy fiction formula and is really important. Yes, your characters may realistically have this conversation in a coffee shop or over dinner or in a carriage or while they're walking or a whole range of other places that are pretty standard, but just because it's what would happen and the location makes sense, is it the most narratively useful place to have that information conveyed? Remember that whole two-bird minimum thing? This is where this really comes into play. This also really leans into Pope in the Pool, because if you have interesting information provided in an interesting context, which is also building world information and giving your reader a whole lot of other stuff, it's efficient, two-bird minimum, and you are not just having talking heads sitting at a table, which you could basically do on a black box set. And the final thing that I want to remind myself of is 80% is good enough. Now, this percentage does vary depending on your source. For Chris Fox, he uses 80% in Right to Market, but in a YouTube video I watched the other day, it was 70%. But the point is still the same. You do not have to get whatever it is you're working on perfect before you can consider it done. And that's particularly important for Nano because you are not supposed to delete words. This means anything you write is fine. If you need to take those words and put them somewhere else in the document, like down at the bottom in white text so you can't see them because you made a complete hash of a scene, that's fine. Do that. Don't discount your words. Remember, 80% is good enough. And on paper counts a long way towards that 80%. So I am going to try and get Act 1 done this week. I am hoping that I will have a decent play with some of our planning processes because I do have a decent word per hour writing time. And I also have a lot of flexibility in my schedule. I will absolutely let you know how that goes. We will see what happens there. But this is a week for enthusiasm and joy and exploring and just having a fantastic time. If you feel like you're struggling, remember there are a whole bunch of other people who are also doing this crazy thing. And if you're watching this and it's not November, there are also going to be people doing this kind of vaguely crazy thing at basically the same time, or there will be people who have done it before and are happy to be enthusiastic with you or help you through any of the pit traps that you happen to stumble across. This is the time to embrace the ridiculousness. I'm going to go brew myself some tea. I'm going to get myself some music on. We are going to write some stories. We're going to have some adventures, and I will see you next time. Bye, lovely.